So we're dealing with the question of, do miracles violate the laws of nature, and therefore even God cannot interfere with nature. And we've seen that the previous two views of laws, as a law of statistics or as an observed brute regularity, do not preclude miracles because by their very definition they admit of exceptions. And now we're dealing with the one view of a law that might seem to say that even God couldn't produce a miracle because laws of nature are like the essence of nature. They're the way nature must behave. And therefore, if God's going to create nature, God cannot violate nature's nature without contradicting God's self. So now what we're going to do, Lewis says, is observe what that would mean to say a law is a necessary truth about nature. Let's take a couple examples. Now, I've given one in quantum theory and one that's at the level of mid-size objects, you might say, as scientists say, the law of gravity. So the principle of uncertainty, Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty, is this famous principle about the way subatomic particles must behave. And the law basically says about that there is this intrinsic uncertainty about the way in which we're going to be able to determine the position of a subatomic particle in relation to its momentum. X is its position, P is its momentum, sigma represents this, what is called the standard deviation in the measurement, or the uncertainty. So what this says is that the product of the uncertainty in the position of an electron and the uncertainty of the momentum, in other cases the velocity of the electron, will always be greater than or equal to this determined amount, i.e. the Planck constant over 2. So what is it saying? Well, it's literally saying that the more certain I get about X's position, right? Say I bring this to 0, then the less certain I'm going to be about the position, the momentum of the electron, because this total quantity always has to be this amount, at least this amount, greater than or equal to this amount. So the more I get this down to 0, the higher this quantity will be. Now you notice, this is therefore not telling me the uncertainty of X or the uncertainty of P at all. It's telling me the uncertainty of X given the certainty about P, or the uncertainty of P given the certainty of X. That's important. You notice the word given there. What it means is this law doesn't tell us anything about the way in which electrons are to be positioned at all, or anything about the momentum of a particular electron at all. It only tells us what the electron's position in relation to its momentum must be given the rate of its uncertainty. So this word given is really important because it's another word for if. It's saying if X is a certain amount, sigma X is a certain amount, then sigma P must be this amount. It's an if-then statement. And this is true with all laws. Let's take the example of the law of gravity. The law of gravity, as Newton presents it, is saying what? That gravitational force is equivalent to the gravitational constant times the product of the two masses over the radial distance, the square of the radial distance. So what is this saying? This is saying that the gravitational force is a function of how large the masses are, the product of the masses are. So does this equation, this law of gravity, tell us what that must be, what F must be? No, everything depends or is given by the actual quantities, the initial conditions. If M is 0, then it turns out that F will be 0. But if M and the product is higher than that, then F will be higher than that. So again, this is a big if-then statement, isn't it? And thus what we see is the law's universal form. Every law has this form. Laws don't cause anything to happen. They're only what restrict things to happen in a certain way, given what are called initial conditions. So every law has this form. If there is a certain initial condition, X, then there will be a certain resulting condition, Y. When my wife and I were younger, we used to hope to win Publishers Clearinghouse. They still have that now, but it's no longer the way it used to be. The way it used to be is you'd get this big envelope in the mail, in snail mail, and it would say in huge letters on the front of Publishers Clearinghouse, it would say, you are the next, say, $10 million winner. But it wouldn't end with a period there. There would be a comma, because then in almost microscopic print at the bottom of the envelope or the other side, it would say, if you have the winning ticket. And that is true, isn't it? It can't be false. If you have the winning ticket, then you won, right? If you have the winning ticket, then you won $10 million. That's true, but it tells you neither whether you have the winning ticket nor whether you have $10 million. It is true that if there is fire, then there is oxygen. But it's still true in a vacuum when there's neither fire nor oxygen, because an if-then statement can be true even if neither the if nor the then is true. So what does then this view of scientific law tell us? It tells us that if you change the initial conditions, then you're going to change the results. Our normal observations of the way nature behaves then is dependent on a normal understanding of initial conditions. It's the normal flow of events given the laws of nature. The way the old flow of events, the pre-existing events occur, then we're going to get a prediction of pre-existing expected results. But if you doctor the initial conditions, then you're going to change the results. In other words, science demands that what? You change the initial conditions, you change the results. So then let's use this example of a miracle to show what that means. We say Mary was a virgin when Jesus was born, that she gave birth and conceived as a virgin without having slept with a man. Now, obviously, that's a miracle. It's a great example of a miracle. It's a great example of what nature could not have done on her own. But does it violate nature's laws? Does it break the law? No, it doesn't. What you see there is God feeding a new set of events into Mary. Perhaps, for example, God inserts into Mary's womb a created sperm that was new and did not come from any other human being. And therefore, this sperm fertilizes Mary's egg that she releases, and we have the birth of a baby. Now you notice something. This feeding into nature of a new initial condition doesn't violate the laws of what? Gestation or birth. Once the sperm is created by God, once a new event is fed into this law, the law acts as it always has. And that is, once you have a fertilized egg in a womb that's ready to receive that egg to be attached, then gestation occurs. And a baby, some 9 months later, will most likely be born. So, far from violating the laws of nature, miracles feed new events into those laws, and therefore, because those laws are necessary, new conditions, new resulting conditions have to occur. If you doctor nature, the initial conditions, the laws tell you that the resulting conditions will be doctored too. That is what a miracle is. reason produces miracles all the time. Take 300 tons of steel and put them a mile above the earth, and what will happen? It will fall. It won't fly. Nature doesn't make metal fly. What nature doesn't do, though, reason manipulates by changing the initial conditions. What if I shape the metal in a certain way that is aerodynamic? What if I bring the metal to a certain speed and attach certain levers to it that allow the flow of wind to go under the shape of this metal object? Then what nature can't do on its own to tons of metal, reason can manipulate nature to do anyway. And so you might say that when we talk about miracles and God interfering in nature, we're not saying God violates the laws of nature. Far from it. God respects the law of nature. You change the initial conditions and you change the results. But there's still one more objection we have to deal with that relates to another one which is even more important. And that's the objection that this idea of feeding new events is really equivalent to violating another fundamental law of nature, and that's the law of matter-energy conservation. This law, as it's stated, is normally that matter-energy can neither be created nor destroyed. But on this view, that law would be violated because what it would say is what happens is God adds new events, new matter, and new energy that nature doesn't already possess to create new results. But if the total matter of an energy of a system must always be preserved the same throughout the process of the working out of a law, then that fundamental law, the first law of thermodynamics, would be violated. We'll deal with that in the next objection in our next segment.